Hey guys, it's Lizzie. Today I'm going to be responding to a video by Father Mike Schmitz called Bruce Jenner and the Transgender Question. I've been wanting to make a response video to this for a long time, but since it is Pride Month, I've been getting tons of questions and video requests about all of these topics, so I thought that this would be the perfect time to make this video. Disclaimers! I agree with Catholic Church teaching on everything. This is not about theology. All the people who are identifying as 100 different genders, that's completely separate from gender dysphoria. Everyone's going to hate me for making this video, but I just find that all the multiple genders and sexualities have zero relevance to gender dysphoria and the issue of being trans. I absolutely love Father Mike Schmitz and Ascension Presents. He super helped me become Catholic. Thank you so much. I am super grateful. I'm going to link below my favorite sermon by Father Mike Schmitz. It is called The Hour That Will Change Your Life. It changed my life. I have immense respect and admiration towards all the ministry he's been doing, and this is not at all a personal attack. Another disclaimer, and I would be so grateful if you would try hard to believe this and not go libel me on the internet. Nowhere in this video am I discussing my opinions on treatment for gender dysphoria, whether that is hormone replacement therapy, surgeries, pronouns. This video is not about any of those topics. It's just about my reaction to this video as it pertains to the scientific definition of gender dysphoria. This is about diagnostics and understanding the mind of someone who is trans, nothing about what to do about it. In this video, I'm going to be using the phrases trans person and gender dysphoria interchangeably. I totally get that any of you might disagree with my terminology, but I just wanted to say that as a caveat to make sure that we're understanding each other. His video is an oversimplification of a very complex issue, and I found the lack of context to be very harmful. I disagree with the lack of scientific research, the rhetoric, and a couple logical fallacies, which I'm going to explain.
What if I made up my mind to rely on you? I thought I wanted it easy, but easy never needed you.
So this video begins with a puppy metaphor, which is intended to be an attention grabber, relatable analogy of the issue. So let's listen.
Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Ascension Presents. So I was over Memorial Day weekend hanging out with my family, and one of my nephews, he pretended he was a dog. And you know, have you ever do that with a little kid when they're like, I'm a puppy, and you're like, okay, you have the ball, and you throw the ball, and they come back with it, and you're playing around. At one point, it was time for supper, and so I was like, okay, buddy, you know, time to get up, wash your hands, get ready for supper. He's like, no, I'm a puppy. And you know, I'm the fun uncle. That's what priests are, the fun uncle. So I'm like, I'm not gonna correct this kid. I just kind of directed him to his parents, and his parents were like, listen, you're a little boy, you're not a dog, wash your hands and sit at the table. And I thought, all right, that's good. That's good parenting right there.
So this is a great representation of all the Catholics I've ever heard on trans issues. They completely forget to mention gender dysphoria, which is the core of the entire issue. As someone diagnosed with a mental illness, I have bipolar disorder type 1. I am very familiar with the American Psychological Association, the APA, and the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders. Gender dysphoria is in the DSM. It is the condition that trans people have. Just like how I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder by a licensed psychologist, and then a year later diagnosed with bipolar disorder by a licensed psychiatrist, someone who is trans will be diagnosed with gender dysphoria by a licensed mental health professional. He does at 3 minutes and 35 seconds use the term
Body dysmorphia,
which I think is alluding to gender dysphoria. Also at the 1 minute mark, he says the phrase,
who experiences the sense of being transgendered.
But that still avoids Gender dysphoria, the entire diagnosis. I thought it would be amazing to make a video explaining to everyone what gender dysphoria is.
Here's the kid. Maybe he really thinks he's a dog, but the reality is you're not a dog. And I was thinking about this and thinking about that love that my nephew's parents have for him.
People who are trans, who have gender dysphoria, do not think they are a dog. He's making this logical jump where a boy pretending to be a puppy is analogous to a person living with gender dysphoria. I just don't see the connection.
Love that my nephew's parents have for him when it comes to this big thing in the news, of course, which is Bruce Jenner, or anyone else who experiences the sense of being transgendered. The idea that Bruce Jenner's case, I have a man's body, but I'm not really a man. I've always felt like a woman. You know, people will say, are you very judgmental? Here's what I'm saying. That I have no judgment on this thing. I just have an assessment. I'm not saying that Bruce Jenner is evil. I just think that perception of him saying I'm actually a woman, I just think that assessment or that perception is off. I think it's inaccurate.
The gender dysphoria is not saying that someone who is born a woman is biologically a man. They are not saying that at all. I think that some of the hyper liberal people have taken this and gone a step further, but the scientists, the medical professionals are saying the entire point of it is someone is born biologically one gender, but they feel like the opposite gender. I genuinely think he hasn't even read or listened to the arguments of trans activists. They're defining gender in a different way than he is defining gender, than a lot of you are defining gender. They don't define gender as being set biologically. They're separating it. And so for him, by saying, no, you're a man, there's a complete dichotomy in these really liberal, SJW trans activists' mind. Obviously, if you have an X and Y chromosome or an X and X chromosome, no one's debating that. There's nothing you can do about it. But they're defining man or woman not based on your physical anatomy or chromosomes, but they have a different view of gender that's separated from that.
Here's what I mean. Just even ask the question. Okay, those of you who are men who are watching this, those of you who are women who are watching this, women, what does it feel like to be a woman? Guys, what does it feel like to be a man? Flip it around and say, men, do you have any idea what it feels like to be a woman? And women, do you have any idea what it feels like to be a man?
Okay, I feel like he doesn't at all understand gender dysphoria. It's not saying Lucy diagnosed with gender dysphoria objectively knows the experience of a male brain. It's just saying that Lucy has a strong conviction that she has the typical feelings and reactions of the other gender. It doesn't matter for the diagnosis whether or not objectively what they think the experience of the other gender is actually is the experience of that gender. So like I said, this video is zero my perspective or opinions on treatment. Something really fundamental that he did not mention, because he never mentioned gender dysphoria, is that there is no cure. There's nothing you can do. It's a living horror movie every single day because they feel trapped. They hate their physical anatomy. And yeah, so many of my subscribers who have this have told me, I wish there was a cure. I wish I could take a medication and get rid of it. But there's nothing really to do about it. I just think it's important for us to understand that the reason people are resorting to these and the reason that professionals are putting people on hormones is because they have a 40% suicide rate. And there's no cure. There's nothing you can do. It's so weird of him and irresponsible to be talking about this and not addressing that it's this living horror constantly and there's nothing they can do about it.
Men, do you have any idea what it feels like to be a woman? And women, do you have any idea what it feels like to be a man? No, the reality is, of course, we don't. We have no idea what it feels like to be a member of the opposite sex. All we have, this is crazy, all we have is gender stereotypes.
I'm going to be reading from the most updated version of the DSM-5. Gender dysphoria is not the same as gender nonconformity, which refers to behaviors not matching the gender norms or stereotype of the gender assigned at birth. In adolescents and adults, gender dysphoria diagnosis involves a difference between one's experienced, expressed gender and assigned gender, and significant distress or problems functioning. It lasts at least 6 months and is shown by at least 2 of the following. I want to be really clear on this. The reason this is on the same level as something like major depression is because it's extreme impairment in functioning. It's not just like you feel like the other gender, you want to be the other gender, but it's majorly disrupting your ability to go to school, to work, to socialize. It's not just you feel like the other gender, you feel like the social roles don't really fit who you are. It's social impairment. You cannot function in your life. Number 1, a marked incongruence between one's experienced expressed gender and primary, secondary sex characteristics. 2, a strong desire to be rid of one's primary and or secondary sex characteristics. So it says a desire to get rid of your sex characteristics. Primary sex characteristics, for a man, it would be genitalia. So wanting to get rid of your genitalia. And then secondary sex characteristics for a guy would be getting a deep voice, facial hair, taller, bigger, boned. Secondary sex characteristics in female would just be having a more curvy body. If I had gender dysphoria, I would want to cut off my breasts. Really intense, and is not at all what Father Mike Schmitz is talking about. This is not just feeling like a different gender. It's really, really extreme. Imagine if you're female wanting to cut off, or if you're a guy, imagine wanting to remove what is down there. Number 3, a strong desire for the primary and or secondary sex characteristics of the other gender. So I would want what is in between. Males. 4, a strong desire to be of the other gender. 5, a strong desire to be treated as the other gender. 6, a strong conviction that one has the typical feelings and reactions of the other gender. If you want to discredit the APA and deny this medical consensus that gender dysphoria is a real mental condition, you also should get ready to deny depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, panic attacks, OCD, ADHD, schizoaffective disorder. Do you understand why I get so angry about this issue? Because you're denying the same medical consensus that is saying that I have a mental illness and should take medication. I know I have plenty of viewers who consistently tell me that my bipolar is demons in my head and that I need to stop taking my meds and just pray it away. So I totally get that there are many of you who are consistent in denying gender dysphoria because you also don't believe in mental illness. But if you're someone who does believe the APA, believe the medical consensus when it comes to mental illness, you need to realize that it's the exact same DSM diagnosing all of these together.
There are stories about, here's the young boy and his parents say, well, we're treating him like a girl. He really is a girl because he identifies as a girl. Why? Well, ever since he was little, we didn't have to tell him. He liked dolls more than he liked trucks. He liked dresses more than he liked jeans. He liked pink more than he liked blue. And you think of that, wait a second, that's how you know that your little boy is actually a girl? Because he just happens to like things that are traditionally associated with girls?
Gender dysphoria is not the same as gender nonconformity, which refers to behaviors not matching the gender norms or stereotype of the gender assigned at birth. So he's saying 2 different diagnostic criteria: cross-dressing and playing with the opposite gender's toys.
He liked dolls more than he liked trucks. Dresses more than he liked jeans. He liked pink more than he liked blue.
If you have those 2 things, you cannot be diagnosed with gender dysphoria and you are not trans. In children, gender dysphoria diagnosis involves at least 6 of the following and an associated significant distress or impairment in functioning lasting at least 6 months. And so 6 of the 8, it's not just you like playing with the toys of the other gender. You hate your physical body. You just have this strong psychological hate of your physical body.
And you think of that, wait a second, that's how you know that your little boy is actually a girl? Because he just happens to like things that are traditionally associated with girls?
It's not that's how you know. You should take your child to a mental health professional to a doctor, someone who's certified and has a degree to diagnose someone. If some parent is just looking at their kid and they're like, they're trans, they should go on hormone replacement therapy, they're an awful parent. And I know, maybe we're dealing with the lowest common denominator, but I don't think it's fair on his end to be the least charitable to the other position. Does that make sense? He didn't put in effort to try and understand the scientific basis of gender dysphoria. It seems like he's implying that some parents just are like, oh, my daughter's playing with trucks and she wears blue. She should go on hormone replacement therapy. She's trans. That's awful if that happens. You should always take your child to a doctor, to a mental health professional, if it seems like they're having symptoms of anything. We shouldn't be diagnosing ourselves outside of a medical professional. Obviously, I make so many videos about bipolar and people relate to the symptoms and they're like, maybe I'm bipolar. But then they go to a mental health professional. So it's the same thing. Anyone who's trans and is identifying as trans but doesn't go to a mental health professional, if they can afford it, I find that really problematic. 1, a strong desire to be of the other gender or an insistence that one is the other gender. 2, a strong preference for wearing clothes typical of the opposite gender. But remember, 6, not just a couple of these. 3, a strong preference for cross-gender roles in make-believe or fantasy play. 4, a strong preference for the toys, games, or activities stereotypically used or engaged in by the other gender. 5, a strong preference for playmates of the other gender. 6, a strong rejection of toys, games, and assigned activities typically of one's gender. 7, a strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy. 8, a strong desire for the physical sex characteristics that match one's experienced gender. For children, cross-gender behaviors may start between ages 2 and 4. The same age at which most typically developing children begin showing gendered behaviors and interests. Gender atypical behavior is common among young children and may be part of normal development. Children who meet the criteria for gender dysphoria may or may not continue to experience it into adolescence and adulthood. Isn't that fascinating? I hear so much from more conservative people that the medical professionals really amping it up, encouraging children to transition. But the DSM is saying that children diagnosed with gender dysphoria could even grow out of it.
Dresses more than he liked jeans. He liked pink more than he liked blue. And you think of that, wait a second, that's how you know that your little boy is actually a girl?
Number 2 is the preference for wearing clothes opposite of the gender. And then 4 is the preference for the toys, games, or activities. You also have to have the strong desire to be of the other gender, insistence of being the other gender. So this would be like if Lucy is 4 years old and let's say I'm a mom and she's like, Lizzie, I am a boy. And she just says this, I am a boy, all the time. It's not, oh, I feel like a boy, but she's saying it a lot and these 5 other things. Number 3 is not what he said. Cross-gender roles in make-believe play or fantasy, which is totally different from Lucy wanting to play with trucks or construction or dinosaurs. I didn't have any brothers. I don't know what guys play with.
Dolls more than he liked trucks.
But it's in make-believe fantasy wanting to take on the roles of the other gender. Rejection of toys, games, activities associated with assigned gender. 7, a strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy. You don't like your body. It's not just you feel like the other gender. It's not just you don't like the toys of the other gender. You hate your physical body. You just have this strong psychological hate of your physical body. 8, a strong desire for the physical sex characteristics that match one's experienced gender.
Or over trucks is arbitrary. In fact, I think about this. One of my older sisters, growing up, she was what you would call back in the day, since I'm old man, what they call back in the day, they called her a tomboy.
Gender dysphoria is not the same as gender nonconformity.
Why? Because she loved hunting, she loved fishing, she was incredible at sports. the field, she's in medicine right now, she's a doctor. The field that she's in right now is a field traditionally dominated by men. Her husband is a stay-at-home dad. Now, she is hard charging, she does a lot of, she's really smart, she takes the bull by the horns, all these kinds of things. Things that are masculine traits. Now, wait, is she a man? No.
Okay, so I kind of related to this. I know a lot of you might not believe me because I come across as very girly because I love wearing makeup and pink and eyelet lace and all of these things. But I've always been very masculine in my mind. I've been attracted to activities with mostly guys. I've had a lot of guy friends. My majors in college, philosophy, religion, majority guys. My debate event in high school, that was my entire life. Lincoln Douglas, majority guys. And I'm very dominant, leader, assertive. That's my personality. So I have a very masculine personality, but that is completely different than hating your sexual anatomy and wanting to cut off my chest. I've never ever had that experience. When I was a little kid, I was not telling my parents, I am a boy. I am a boy. It's totally different.
Things that are masculine traits. Now, wait, is she a man? No. Why? Because she's a woman. She's the mom of her kids. My brother-in-law, he's patient, he's kind, he's gentle with his kids, stay-at-home dad. Traditionally, things associated with women. How do we know he's not a woman? Well, because he looks at his body. His body reveals that he's actually a man. I
know there's a lot of super alt-left people, but I think that most doctors and most people will admit that obviously, biologically, you're still a man or you're still a woman. You still have those chromosomes. The difference is the way people are defining gender.
Because I could change these external factors, but the reality is, at the heart of everything, I'm still a man or I'm still a woman.
I genuinely think he hasn't even read or listened to the arguments of trans activists. They're defining gender in a different way than he is defining gender, than a lot of you are defining gender. They don't define gender as being set biologically. They're separating it. And so for him, by saying, no, you're a man, there's a complete dichotomy in these really liberal SJW trans activists' mind. Obviously, if you have an X and Y chromosome or an X and X chromosome, no one's debating that. There's nothing you can do about it. But they're defining man or woman not based on your physical anatomy or chromosomes, but they have a different view of gender that's separated from that.
We all know this when it comes to, I'm sure some of you have this experience of people in your life who have suffered from something like another kind of body dysmorphia, something like anorexia. There's a young woman that I remember working with years ago. It was painful. She was in the hospital because she was so thin. She was 98 pounds, but she still perceived herself as being fat. Say, no, I still feel fat. I still feel fat. Wait a second, but your perception and reality is off.
This is not analogous at all. Because someone who has anorexia and they're seeing their body as bigger than it actually is, the person with gender dysphoria, in regard to their physical anatomy, they're very vividly aware that their physical anatomy is not what they want it to be. That's the problem.
If my perception doesn't match up with reality, it's not reality that has to change, it's my perception of reality that has to change.
Something really fundamental that he did not mention, because he never mentioned gender dysphoria, is that there is no cure. There's nothing you can do. For bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or depression or anxiety, you can take medication and it gets rid of the symptoms and you still have the genetics. I'm still bipolar even though I get rid of my mania and depression. A lot of mental illnesses, if you just sleep, have a better sleep schedule, work out, eat better, it can kind of help the symptoms. But from my understanding with gender dysphoria, you can do talk therapy. And like the DSM was talking about, some people who have gender dysphoria as a child do grow out of it. And like I said in this video, I'm not promoting hormone replacement therapy or surgeries. I'm not promoting anything. I just think it's important for us to understand that the reason people are resorting to these and the reason that professionals are putting people on hormones is because they have a 40% suicide rate. And there's no cure. There's nothing you can do. And that's why people change how their face looks and they grow out their hair or they want their voice to change, all these things, because there's nothing they can do. The gender dysphoria is so strong. It's a living horror movie every single day because they feel trapped. They hate their physical anatomy. And yeah, so many of my subscribers who have this have told me, I wish there was a cure. I wish I could take a medication and get rid of it. But there's nothing really to do about it. And so that's why they're resorting to hormone replacement therapy and to all these things. I just wish there was a little bit more compassion, and I'm sure he is very compassionate. And if he met someone who's trans and was like, they were in his campus ministry or something, I'm sure he would be really empathetic and compassionate and loving. But I just think it's so weird of him and irresponsible to be talking about this and not addressing that it's this living horror constantly and there's nothing they can do about it.
But when it comes to sex, we all lose our brains and we all lose our minds. And a man goes in or a woman goes in and says, "Doctor, these external genitalia are not mine. They're not actually a part of me. I perceive that they shouldn't be here." And apparently we're okay with doctors saying, okay, well then we have sex reassignment surgery or gender reassignment surgery. And yet that seems to be kind of covering over the real problem, just like amputating a healthy limb will be covering over the real problem.
Obviously though, the sexual reassignment surgery is not going to fix it because you're diagnosed with gender dysphoria. There is no cure for gender dysphoria. So you can try to live your life as the opposite gender. It's kind of like with anything else in the DSM, you can take medication and be on the medication your entire life, but it does not get rid of the problem. A majority of trans people never get the sexual reassignment surgery. Even really big YouTubers who have a lot of money have made videos about how they're choosing to not get the surgery just because it's really expensive, it has a hard recovery time. I mean, after any surgery, you can go into depression, and so people choose to not get the surgery. A lot of people who are trans, they just want to, if they're a guy, to grow out their hair and go on the hormone replacement therapy. Maybe like this one trans YouTuber I watched, Blair White, she got a lot of face surgeries to make her face look different. But a majority of trans people are not cutting off perfectly working body parts. That does not represent the current situation. And maybe a lot of them would like to have the sexual reassignment surgery, but I watch a lot of trans YouTubers, which is so random, but I don't know anyone who's trans, so I was very curious. So I just know a lot about trans people because I watch so many YouTubers, and the vast majority do not have the sexual reassignment surgery and don't want to get it even if they could afford it.
Covering over the real problem, just like amputating a healthy limb will be covering over the real problem. In fact, that's the conclusion that a guy named Dr. Paul McHugh came to. He was the chief psychiatrist of Johns Hopkins Hospital. So this isn't like a crackpot doctor. This is the chief psychiatrist, ex-chief psychiatrist of Johns Hopkins. He dealt with a lot of these cases of people who identified as transgender. They saw themselves as a member of the opposite sex. And with sex reassignment surgery, he said, yes, some of these patients experienced a satisfaction of that reassignment, but they were still disturbed. They were still hurting. And he came to this conclusion. He said, we had to stop doing sex reassignment surgery because, he says, we found that producing satisfied but a still troubled patient seemed an inadequate reason for surgically amputating normal organs.
I absolutely love that he brought in a study and a doctor and a quote. I wish that the beginning of the video had consisted of that. I think it would have been interesting too to bring in an opposite perspective though, just to show both sides of the research. And for this, I really recommend Patrick Coffin. He has made several 40-minute to an hour and a half long videos interviewing doctors, specialists, researchers on gender dysphoria and trans issues. And so if you're really wanting to know in depth about the studies, research, all of these things, I'm gonna link below a playlist of several of his videos in which he talks about this. I am so grateful to Patrick Coffin. He's been doing so amazing. I don't see any other Catholic figure giving even an ounce of care to talk about the research and the condition of gender dysphoria. And it is infuriating to me because it is so easy to research this and to know about it. I don't understand.
And when it comes down to it, that's the message of love. This is not a message of judging. This is not a message of criticizing. This is not even a message of trying to blame anyone or make them a monster. No, absolutely not. These are people who are hurting. Anyone, the people in my life who have been hurting from anorexia or any other kind of body dysmorphia, or even this kind of sense of identifying with members of the opposite gender, all of that comes down to someone who's hurting. When Catholics, when those who belong to Jesus are willing to get into the messiness of someone's brokenness, someone's wound, it doesn't matter what it is.
So he's saying someone's brokenness, someone's wound. I think a lot of times it kind of reminds me of how people talk about mental illness, where they don't realize that it's a real condition, diagnosable. It's not just they're hurting, they're wounded, but they have a diagnosable medical condition that does not have a cure. If they find Christ and find emotional healing, that will not cure their gender dysphoria. Just like how if I have severe depression and have a great relationship with God, it will do nothing to get me out of that severe depression because I need medication. But they don't have medication.
That's one of the best things we do as Catholics is we walk with people. We listen to them. We hear what they're really saying. And then we're able to just not have to yell at anyone and not have to criticize anyone. Just be able to say, let me walk with you.
I think it is so important to listen to people and their stories. And that's why I watch so many trans YouTubers, because it's only 0.6% of the population. And so most of us are never going to meet someone who's trans. Although so many more people are identifying with trans now who do not have gender dysphoria. I'm going to make an entire other video on this, but all the people who are identifying as 100 different genders, that's completely separate from gender dysphoria. Having gender dysphoria, being trans, relies on a sexually dimorphic understanding of human beings. There are two genders. You're born with an X and Y chromosome, biologically a male, you hate your anatomy, you have gender dysphoria your entire life, and you want to live life as a female. Or vice versa, where you're biologically born a female, but you have gender dysphoria, you hate your sexual anatomy, you constantly feel as if you are a man. There's two genders. That's the whole point. Having all these other genders, it seems to even invalidate their experience. And like I said earlier, everyone's going to hate me for making this video, but I just find that all the multiple genders and sexualities have zero relevance to gender dysphoria and the issue of being trans. So I really love the way he ended the video, and I totally agree with it. And not to just shout out my own content, but this is one of the videos I'm most proud of that I've ever made, and it wasn't me who made it, but one of my YouTube friends. His YouTube channel is called Orthodox Lunatic. He's an Orthodox Christian, converted in from a Protestant background. We made an entire collaboration video in which I interviewed him for 20 minutes, and he explained in depth what it feels like to have gender dysphoria, to be diagnosed, to go through the treatment, and how that relates to his Christian faith. He's not transitioning. His name is Isaac, and he's not going by a female name. He's living life as a male with gender dysphoria. And so if you want to walk with someone and really understand it, I really recommend his channel. That video is going to be linked below and up here. I love his videos so much. You'll see my comments on a lot of the videos on his channel. Also, I'm going to link below other trans YouTubers who I watch who are not Christian. Maybe some of them are. Not just when it comes to gender dysphoria, but every type of political, social issue. I find YouTube channels and networks and news sites opposite of my beliefs just to understand their perspectives. Why I find this video format problematic. So if he did this same video style, but about religious hallucinations and bipolar disorder, where you believe you are an angel and the son of God, an analogy of how this video feels, it would be as if there was some huge celebrity who was bipolar, who went into a manic episode and was preaching, trying to start a new religion, saying he was an angel and the son of God and was in heaven and starting a new form of Christianity. So it would be as if Father Mike Schmitz made a video, ex-celebrity and the bipolar question.
So I was over Memorial Day weekend hanging out with my family.
Instead of the puppy metaphor, he'd start the video saying, my brother and his daughter was playing and she's like, I'm an angel, I'm in heaven with God, I have a special relationship with God. Does that make sense? I'm not saying gender dysphoria is a mental illness in the way bipolar is, but I feel like it's pretty analogous since they're both in the DSM and they're about to have dinner.
Time for supper.
And so then the dad is
get ready for supper.
Like, no, you're not an angel, you're not talking to God right now. And then he transitioned and say,
when it comes to this big thing in the news, of course,
and look at this celebrity. He thinks he is an angel and starting a new religion. It is not good to start new denominations of Christianity. You have to stick to the teaching magisterium. And so it'd be as if he made this 10-minute video and not even talking about bipolar the entire video, but it was literally just someone diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so instead of just mentioning at the beginning of the video, hey, bipolar disorder is in the DSM. Here are some criteria of how to diagnose someone with bipolar disorder. These are symptoms of a manic episode. If you fit 4 of these 7 criteria, that's how it feels. And if I had gender dysphoria, I would feel attacked by this video because he didn't even mention gender dysphoria. You should go into the video explaining the actual mental condition and the diagnostic criteria. It just doesn't make sense to me to talk about kind of the tip of the iceberg, right? Transitioning is kind of like one part of the entire gender dysphoria being trans. And it would be the same as if you were talking about one part of a psychotic break in bipolar disorder, but not talking about bipolar disorder as a whole. I know every YouTuber has different styles, and Ascension Presents doesn't typically do like 30-minute videos with quotes from different research, but I think that he could have made this video just 5 minutes longer, and at the beginning of the video gone through the diagnostic criteria of gender dysphoria and maybe even read quotes or interviewed for a couple minutes someone who had gender dysphoria, just so the audience could go away from the video understanding what it is to be trans and what gender dysphoria even is. This was a really intense video. I'm prepared to go do PR damage control after this video because of what people will say about me and lie about me when it comes to my theology. I agree with Catholic Church teaching on everything. This is not about theology. And don't go away from this video thinking I'm against church teaching. Thank you so much for loving and caring about me. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!